Do you want to build your brand by being a guest on industry-leading podcasts? If you're a business leader, an author, or a speaker, my guess is that you do. Picture this. You, a dynamic executive easily connecting with engaged audiences, turbocharging your top-of-funnel marketing, and creating a treasure trove of content with every episode. Podcasting is a game changer that you've been waiting for. And podcastally.com is your VIP ticket to podcast PR success. Say goodbye to the ordinary and hello to the extraordinary exposure. Let the Podcast Ally team connect you with the best-in-class podcast for you to be a guest on. Head over to podcastally.com and use the promo code DT for a 10% discount on Podcast Ally services. That's podcastally.com, promo code DT. Welcome to High Octane Leadership with Donald Thompson. This season, we're diving deeper with more solo episodes, where I'll share the experiences that have led to recognition by EY, Forbes, Fast Company, and others. Not as a boast, but as milestones on my entrepreneurial path. From growing multi-million-dollar firms to successful business exits and building high-performance teams with a global perspective. I'll reveal the insights and strategies from my journey and share them with you so that we can win together. Alongside these solo episodes, we'll have industry visionaries and thought leaders, and we'll explore effective leadership. Ready to empower your leadership journey with real success stories? Let's embark on this transformational journey together. In this episode, I'm talking with Jackie Ferguson, co-founder and vice president of content, programming, and products at the Diversity Movement. Jackie is the best-selling author of the Inclusive Language Handbook and hosts the top-ranking Diversity Beyond the Checkbox podcast. Her impactful work earned her a spot on the 2023 Inc. Female Founders 200 list and garnered awards from Fast Company and other globally recognized publications. Thanks for joining me on the show, Jackie.
Thanks, Don. I'm glad to be back.
One of the things, Jackie, we're going to talk about today is peak performance and peak well-being. You know, a lot of times when we're talking about well-being in the workplace, I think a group of folks that get a little bit left behind in the conversation is those high-performing business leaders, those emerging talented folks that are on airplanes traveling the globe, folks that are working that 50, 60-hour-a-week work week to really chase their personal vision and goals, and also for the goals of the organization. And one of the things that's really important is that the well-being thought process that most companies are adopting today in employee wellness, employee engagement, that we really think about our emerging leaders and our high-octane performers in that conversation. And so that's one of the things that we want to talk about today. How do you do both? How do you manage that so that we're not encouraging burnout, even though we are chasing high standards of performance? And so I'm really appreciative of you helping guide this conversation and looking forward to this talk track.
Me too, John. And, you've said well-being for high performers isn't about just preventing burnout. It's about fostering an environment where physical health, mental clarity, and emotional resilience are paramount. So we're going to start there. And today's discussion will delve into defining well-being in the context of high performance, understanding the challenges, unveiling strategies that leaders can employ to ensure their top talent flourishes within their organizations. And I resonate with this because high performers have a high standard, and your brand is to be exceptional. It's your brand to get it all done with high quality. But high performance is the combination of hard work and recovery. So let's get into this conversation. Don, let's first talk about the intersection of well-being and high performance. How do you conceptualize well-being for high performers within your organization, and why is it critical to their success?
One of the things that I like to use are examples and analogies that are easy to relate to, right? And so in this one, I'll use a sports example, but then I'll also use the example of a singer, right? You and I are headed to. You're my business partner, also my wife, but we're going to see Adele in Las Vegas. So I'll use that example first.
Yes.
Well, obviously, those who don't know who Adele is, which would be probably just a few folks, but she's a phenomenal vocalist,
Right.
right? And if you kind of put kind of the folks at the top tier, right, it's a show we've been wanting to see for many, many years, and we paid a pretty penny to get these tickets to be able to go. But when you think about someone with a high performance, special, unique talent, then what you also have to think about is how do you keep that talent at its highest level of effectiveness? And that means Adele most likely has to drink a lot of water, has to rest her voice, has to make sure that alcohol and tobacco or anything like that has to have a really healthy lifestyle that leads one to be able to perform under the lights at the highest level capacity. Most of us think about Kobe Bryant or Michael Jordan or a Tom Brady, and we think about their success on the field and the touchdowns that they scored, the Super Bowl rings, the NBA championships. But if you watch documentaries on Tom Brady, you will also see that within his lifestyle is a high premium on well-being, both physical and mental in terms of creating peak performance. So you'll see athletes use visualization techniques. You'll see them very focused on their diet, and rest and recovery is a critical component to their longevity and peak performance. So I say all that to say we have to think about our high performers as corporate athletes. And that means that you have to have the ability to perform at a very high level for periods of time, but you have to build in periods of time that are not necessarily downtime where you're not working, but you're not running at that highest level of RPMs. And so you have to think about both that performance, that recovery, and that well-being from a physical standpoint. But then you also have to think about your mental modeling of what success looks like. And then the third prong to that, so you have your physical, your mental, and then you have your teamwork, that you can't do it by yourself. I was very clear in terms of the folks that we're working with in this example, they're playing team sports. You say, well, Adele is a solo singing artist, but she has writing partners. She has a band that helps her perform. She has someone that helps with her makeup. Someone helps her get to the arena. She has a team that surrounds her so that she's not doing everything and can focus the majority of her energy on that amazing performance. So that's some of the context about how I think about that corporate athlete.
I like that term, and it's great to remember it that way so that you can understand the hard work plus the recovery and the team. So I think that's great. Don, what are some common myths about high performers and their well-being that need debunking?
That you can be just as productive in your 60th hour as you are in your first 20 hours of working. Sometimes people work hard and don't realize when they're being ineffective. And personally, as a high octane achiever, as somebody that really believes in a strong work ethic, that likes to be busy and likes to do a lot of things, I had to realize that my temperament and thus my effectiveness decreases after that 55th hour. Now, for me, I can work and I've trained and I'm geared towards as an entrepreneur, as a leader, as a CEO, I can work 50 plus hours a week and not get tired. But as I've gotten older, right, it's closer to 45 than it is 50 where my effectiveness starts to change. And so realizing that, I have to be very careful of the type of work I'm doing at different points in my effectiveness ratio. So I don't take very detailed financial meetings, negotiating contracts at the end of weeks when I've already put in 45, 50 hours a week. I'm not as strong. I'm not as on point. I can still do creative work during that because it's more fun. I can still work with my product teams on different innovation because that stuff brings me energy. But I have to make sure during the front end of the week, I have to do anything that doesn't bring me energy, isn't fun, but is necessary for the growth of the business. And so I've had to learn the push and pull of what types of things I can work on in what level of energy spectrum that I'm living in at that moment.
That's so important to be able to really control your week. And, so many of us have heard, oh, I work 60 hours a week as if it's some kind of personal achievement, when really those weeks are necessary for high achievers sometimes, but sometimes you need a little bit of rest and you need to dial it back, and that has to be okay as well.
And one of the things when I talk to and coach business leaders, the amount of effort we put in used to be the indicator of success, right? Like that was cocktail party cool, how hard you worked. What it didn't uncover is that a lot of times we were doing things ourselves that we should be delegating to build a stronger team. What that didn't describe is that we were working on wrong things. And because of our inefficiency, we were doing same things twice because our communication wasn't effective. So we had a higher level of rework within our organization because we weren't good at communicating our expectations, the tools, the leadership to our team. What doesn't come out in those 70-hour work weeks is the honest answer from people of how they could be more effective if they had a better plan for their week, if they delegated to team members, and if they had a better strategy versus doing everything from the seat of their pants. So as I matured as a business leader, I didn't necessarily relax the number of hours immediately. I increased the scrutiny on the hours I was spending. And by increasing the scrutiny on the hours I was spending, I found a lot of efficiencies that helped me be more effective, have more fun, and get more done.
That's great. We alluded to the challenges, Don, for high achievers with regard to well-being. Could you outline the specific well-being challenges that high performers face, particularly those that are less obvious?
So a couple of them, and I'll use one that's less obvious but highly impactful. When you start using phrases like, I'm the only one that can do this, it is usually not true. That statement is either an arrogant statement, it is a lack of building a powerful team around you, it is not really reflecting on the full body of work that needs to be done. In any project, let's just say a project has 10 elements. All 10 elements do not need to be accomplished by a senior professional. Of the 10 elements of any project, it's usually broken up into threes. There's some junior level work in there, there's some lower level work in there, and there's some very senior level work in there. So a lot of times our egos don't allow us to bring people to the party because we'll say phrases like this. I hear it all the time. It's faster if I just do it myself, right? And what people do when they say that is they are focused on the short term of a task, when as a business leader, we need to be strategic. And what's the value if I teach 2 people how to support me on these 10 tasks? And even if they can only get to 7 out of the 10, then the third and fourth project like this, I only have to do task 7, 8, 9, because the other tasks are handled by my team, right? But if you don't invest, then you're still going to always be doing 1 through 10 by yourself. And you cannot scale a leadership team that way. You cannot scale a business that way if you're using phrases like, I'm the only one that can do X. It's faster to do it by myself. It may be true in that instance, but it's typically not true to build the future of the business.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And certainly that both of those phrases have been things that I have said in the past. And because you are my husband and manager, we have been able to work through that and and move into being able to delegate real work out, and it has built our team. So that's spot on.
Another thing I would say, Jackie, that is super important to growing leaders and then protecting the well-being of high performers is what a way to tell somebody you trust them and believe in them is giving them stretch assignments. And then being a coach and a mentor and a cheerleader to help them achieve it. And then when that person does stretch and do more than they thought they could, that becomes their new normal and reduces the weight off of you as an individual or me as an individual or Lee as an individual. And now there's more capacity in the organization. So to your question of what do leaders miss that is subtle, is our job is to build organizational capacity, not just get tasks done. And so by building organizational capacity, we build more corporate value, which means we're more valuable as leaders.
Absolutely. Don, how does the continuous pressure to perform at a high level impact mental and emotional well-being?
The stress is real.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the pressure is real. You're an entrepreneur and you've got 20 people, 30 people, 200 people. And every 2 weeks, you got to make a payroll. And all of a sudden, one of your largest customers is 30 days behind and cash is tight. It's pressure. When you're negotiating a large partnership agreement that could make or break the quarter, when you are going out seeking investment if you're a startup, the pressure is real in that you have decided as a leader, as a C-suite leader, to be responsible for the life and the livelihoods of others. Not someone's physical life or death, but life and livelihood. If you're creating a secure and a growing and expansive work experience for people, their lives are better as a result of that. Right? And so leaders take on a significant amount of responsibility. And I'll tell you, one of the things that was a failing of mine, I fixed it to a degree, is that ability to ask for help. High performers doesn't mean you're not human and don't have the same things going on that everyone else does. Right? Many of us are in the sandwich generation. We have things going on with our kids, things going on with our parents. People have relationship issues, whether they're a high performer or not. People are dealing with mental health issues, whether they're a high performer or not. People have life. I like to say to friends, and when I'm a little more casual, life be lifing.
Yeah.
Right? And one of the things that is a struggle for high performers is we typically are used to having the answers. So asking for help is really hard. Right? And so it'd be interesting to see the data, right? This is anecdotal, but I bet there's data behind it of how many of our high performers actually use the employee assistance programs that are within their companies, right? How many of your high performers that when they need to go to therapy because they're working on some things in their personal life or need an executive coach because they need to work on some things in their professional life are taking advantage of those things that their company would gladly support them with? Because high performers are also highly productive. So if you have a high performer, companies across the world are investing in executive coaching and training, in learning for their potential leaders and their leaders because the payback is so strong and evident. But most high performers don't ask the way that they should. And asking for help is something that I had to learn personally. That when things are getting a little bit too much, when times are getting a little to where things are overwhelming, do I call Grant Willard, my mentor and friend, and say, hey, I'd love to just have a cup of coffee, right? We're used to solving problems and being the ones with the right answers. So what I would say, Jackie, to your question is high performers need to learn how to strategically ask for help in their professional and personal lives the same way that they're willing to help others.
I think that's so important, Don. And, often high performers evaluate themselves on being high performers, but there are times where they have to dial it down to deal with other factors that are impacting their life. So I think that's so important. Let's discuss some effective well being strategies, Don. What are some proven strategies that you've implemented to support the well being of your organization's high performers?
So I'll use what we've done for folks and then things that I've learned personally. And let's talk about the team first. When people are going through things that are extraordinary in their personal life, as a leader, you have to give them space to step off the corporate treadmill. And so as a leader, it's not necessarily a program, it's a mindset, it's a mentality, right? And when you ask them, it's like, hey, listen, I know you got a lot going on. You're taking care of a family member. Would this be a good week for you just to work completely at home this week? and give that leader that space to do something that's out of their customary component. Second thing that a leader can do. Listen, you're juggling 3 or 4 different really significant projects. But I also know, because we've developed that partnership, that you got a lot going on here. Can I take a few meetings on this project off your plate this week? I'd be happy to jump in and handle a couple of these. Because you know what? Over the years, you've more than done that for me in our partnership. See, as a leader, we can have our EAP programs, which are great, right? All the things that help people think through and talk through and understand what resources are available. But sometimes we have to take the pressure release valve and take a little pressure and intensity off some of our high octane leaders so that they can focus on the 1 or 2, 3 projects that make the meaningful difference when they're trying to impact 5 or 6. And as a business leader, as the CEO, as someone that outside looking in can see that perspective, I often have a better ability to put that same project in its right context or put it on the shelf completely. But I've got to take it off that leader or they'll feel guilt for not getting it done. Because most people, when they make a list and they've got 5 big rocks on their list, well, 2 or 3 of those rocks are more important than all 5 put together. But they'll still stress, have guilt, have anxiety over all 5 rocks equally. And so as a leader, we really have to help our team members understand what true prioritization looks like and where we can support them the way they support us throughout the year as CEOs and leaders throughout the process. And so I think that comes back to something that we talked about in a previous episode, building that trust, that openness, that loyalty, that really looking out for each other is a two-way street.
That's great, Don. And, one of the things that I seized on when you were sharing that is the permission piece, right? The proactive permission. So it's more than just a leader saying, well, they can always ask, they can always let me know what they need. But taking that proactive stance to give permission for that high performer to dial back, I think is so important.
I've found, Jackie, and I agree with you, I want to even extend it and double down on that comment. Most of your high performing leaders are never going to ask you to scale back. They respect you so much, they respect the responsibility you've given to them, that they're going to just continue to work it almost to break points. So you as a leader have to check in on them. You are, here's an even more important point. As you get more senior in organizations, and this is where I'll talk about not just our team example I gave or myself personally, but executives that I'm coaching or boards that I'm on of billion-dollar organizations. So I'm very fortunate, whether it's financial services, healthcare, retail, to talk to a lot of different business leaders throughout the country. And your C-suite, I mean, these are ballers. These are folks that have highly educated, high performers, high work ethic. And they're just not built, right, to ask for a smaller plate. So you as a leader have to really know enough about them, what they're doing, and the long-term value you place on them, right, in the organization to know when to help modulate some of the things that they're working on or working through.
Love that. And you're talking about relationships, right? And knowing those employees that you have. You're talking about trust. You're talking about being able to help them dial down when it's tough. Are there other ways, Don, that leaders can ensure a balance between driving high performance and nurturing well-being?
One, the two are not mutually exclusive. You don't have to drive well-being and sacrifice high performance. You're just navigating the path to getting that high performance differently. And that's super important. So let me give an example of what you can do as a leader and get real granular. I'll use our leadership team and some advice I've given folks. We used to meet every week with our leadership team and go over certain things and have an hour and 15-minute, 90-minute meeting. As we got to know each other, our goals were more cemented and people needed a little bit more time in their life schedule. We moved those meetings to every 2 weeks. We weren't less effective. It was a phase in our business that required them to be weekly. And then as our team evolved, the unity evolved, right? It didn't require every 2 weeks. So as a leader, one of the things you have to think through is how are you taking your team's time, and is it the best, highest value use of their time? And sometimes as leaders, we like to meet because we get touch points, right? And we get to hear and see and touch and make sure everybody's working on all the right things and all this stuff. When in reality, right, we need to have more effective one-on-ones. And then from that, we start to really know what our team needs and what our individuals needs. So it's the productivity of your meetings, the frequency of your meetings, right, that I also think play a big part in what we're doing. I'll give another example, right? I, like many leaders, am a little all over the map sometimes, right? Like, listen, I get it. And from time to time, I'll ask my team members for information they already gave me. And when I do that now, this is a more mature perspective, I still do it. But I give my team freedom to say, I shared that with you in this report. And then I was like, thank you. I got it. No need to find it, resend it. I got it. Don, you coached us to put all the information that you need into this agenda in this format. If you would use that, that'd be amazing. I want my team to push back on me when I'm asking them to do redundant work. I give my team that space. It doesn't mean that I'm not going to make a mistake, mess up, all that good stuff. I had some business leaders I was coaching that were still sending their teams emails at 3:00 in the morning on weekends. Again, listen, guilty. Now, not in the last decade or so, but I've been there, right? I had to learn to use the schedule send button in email. If I'm okay working at 2:00 in the morning, all good. What I had to realize is that if you send an email on the weekend, if you send an email on odd hours, because your team wants to please you, they want to hit the goal, they want to do things that matter, they're not just going to let that email sit there until they're working again. You're going to pull them away from that baseball game with their kids. You're going to pull them away from that rest that they're doing on the hike. You're going to pull them back into work mode, and you're taking away their rest that they need so they can be productive as that corporate athlete. And so as a leader, I had to realize it's not what I'm trying to communicate, it's how it's received. My mindset as a leader is, oh, I'm just sending it right now. I'm working. You can get to it when you need to. But that's not the reality. The reality is it's a life interrupt. So I had to learn how to, even in my work style, I do a lot of creative work, sometimes late at night, weekends when things are super quiet. Schedule send is a beautiful thing. And then I'll just send them at regular times and different things of that nature. The other thing I had to teach my team with Slack or Teams or whatever, if it's green, that means you're working. If it is not green and it says out of office, if it says on vacation, then you're not working. But if it's green, I'm gonna call you.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
So, but if you turn it off, I'm going to respect what that notation says.
Yeah.
And we had to have those kind of communications. And it sounds super simplistic, but it's really not in terms of building a great relationship with your high performers.
That's great, Don. Now, we've talked about the one-to-one leader to employee relationship, but what are some leadership practices that are essential in building a culture that prioritizes the well-being of high performers? So we talked about the one-to-one. Let's talk about building a culture within the organization that prioritizes well-being.
Think about someone that is in your organization that is a different learner. So here's what I'm trying to communicate. I can go into a meeting kind of ad hoc, one or two agenda bullets, and there's no anxiety for me. I'm good to go. I can kind of wing it. There are other folks in your organization that need to plan, do their homework before they feel confident engaging in a meeting, right? So one of the things that's very simple but powerful is sending out pre-reads and agendas for meetings a day or so in advance. Now, when we talk about well-being, why is that? So this hits both inclusion and well-being. Because if people feel like they're coming to a meeting unprepared, and they are used to having everything buttoned up, that's part of their personality, then that meeting has a heightened sense of anxiety. From an inclusion standpoint, the person is less likely to participate. We're getting less new ideas. So that simple act of better meeting preparation reduces the anxiety in the meeting. And then here's another thing that is really powerful in terms of setting the environment with your team. You have to give people the freedom to say, I am not prepared for this meeting. Here's what happens when you don't do that. Somebody comes to a meeting, and I'll use me as an example. They present something ad hoc, not prepared. They threw it together. It ain't a great meeting. My reaction to that can be somewhat allergic. What I had to train our team and leaders to train their teams to do is if you're pushing a meeting a week, you're not prepared, you're not ready, and you're just trying to slough stuff off. But if you need a day or two delta, most things aren't that time critical that they can't be discussed moving it a day or two to give somebody a moment when they need a moment. When they were up all night because they had a sick child and you got an 8 a.m. meeting that's pretty intense and they're just barely making it through, I want to create an environment where that person has the freedom. Can we do that one day later so I can just get my legs back under us? Right? That communication doesn't lower the standard of what I expect from that individual in that meeting, but it gives them the best chance to meet that expectation, given that life can always get any of us a little bit out of balance. Right? I'll give just a real-time example. When we were negotiating the sale of the diversity movement, was the same time that my dad was going through some very intense surgeries. At a time in my life where he could have died. I don't even like saying, I don't even get those words out, but like he could have died. That's the significance of the surgeries he was going through. And I remember a pretty critical moment in meetings with WPO, a couple of meetings with my client, Hugo Boss. And I just had to talk to my clients and say, listen, I do not want to be in a place where I'm not giving great value. I've got some personal things that's going on for the next couple of weeks, right? I'm going to be a little less attainable, but when I'm dialed in, I'm going to be 100% present. And everyone understands that. Everyone understands if you're a new parent, but if you don't communicate it, then you feel that others don't care, but they didn't even know to understand and give them an opportunity to care. So you have to create an environment where transparency of life issues is not an excuse, but it is a legitimate reason for flexibility in terms of when you deliver, how you deliver, not the quality of what you deliver, right? And that's something that's super, super important. And my partners, WPO, and now we're a WPO company at the Diversity Movement. My clients that I was working with hands-on, because there's a handful of clients that I still do consulting work for that I enjoy and kind of in the trenches. But because we're all working through this thing called life, most people are pretty empathetic as long as you're clear with them, as long as you let them know when they're going to get the deliverable they need, and then the standard doesn't decrease.
So we've talked about, Don, the leader's perspective and the company's perspective and the culture's perspective of creating that well-being for those high performers. Now let's talk about the employee's perspective. What is your guidance for high performers? Because, it's a joint responsibility between the company and the employee to manage that. You alluded to that in what you just said. What advice would you offer to high performers to maintain their well-being while striving for professional excellence?
So everyone's relationship with work is different,
Mm-hmm.
right? Some people work just to get enough money to pay their bills and enjoy their life right now. They're not trying to build their career exponentially. They're not trying to sell a business. Their relationship with work could be very different than yours. So one thing is you have to understand people's relationship with work. because I could talk to them based on my relationship with work, my intensity towards work, my goals, and it land completely wrong, right, with that individual. So number one is you have to know your audience, your team member, your teammate, based on the tempo and the language that you're using in terms of their commitment to work. The second thing is I had to learn different phrases in interacting with people. So instead of just giving a critique of something that was right or wrong, I had to use phrases of how can I be helpful to get us to this standard? Is there a way that I can participate with you? Is there something that's lacking in the resources that you have that you need? Right? And offer that support so that people understand that we're in this thing together. The third thing that I would say that is really, really important in dealing with folks, especially employees in their first and second job in the workplace, is they don't know what professional communication should be like. So you have to ask more questions, right? You have to be that coach in the moment while they're working on a project and give them the why something's important as well as the when and the how. You have to slow down to move quickly. Because what I will say generationally, whether it's Gen Z or millennials, whether it's Gen Z or millennials and how they relate to Gen Xers like myself, et cetera, we all have biases in terms of the way we think about work and workplace communication. And we typically talk to one another based on our point of view. We need to learn to communicate based on the point of view, right, of the recipient of that communication. Because some people may think they're working at a high octane level based on their perspective, right? And so there's usually a disconnect, right? You as a leader and that newer employee, because this is their first or second job. So you've got to be a little bit more thoughtful in how you bring people up to a standard of excellence over time and be firm and gracious. In no way in what I'm saying, whether it's talking about diversity, equity, inclusion, employee engagement, high performance leaders, do I advocate lowering standards of excellence for that job, that role, that company. But I do encourage leaders to use a language that allows people to grow with you, allows people to be included, and to know that you care even while they know you're committed to a business and a financial outcome.
Absolutely. And Don, are there particular resources or tools or maybe some habits that high performers should adopt to safeguard their own well-being?
There's a book, let me grab it really quick. It's called The Fearless Organization, and the tag is Creating Psychological Safety in the Workplace for Learning, Integration, and Growth. And the reason that I'm seizing on that term that was in this, the key in this book, psychological safety, is when people have the psychological safety to be open with their team members and their managers, that truth of where they are helps you respond and grow together. Because I can't help someone that I don't know what their challenges are. And that person can't ask for help if they don't feel safe in doing so. And so psychological safety, whether it is microaggressions that are keeping that construction worker focused on things from they heard from management versus the safety of what they're doing in the field with that machinery that affects their physical safety, or that psychological safety that keeps somebody from asking a question in the meeting because they don't want to feel like they've asked a question that they should know, or they don't want to ask a question that creates vulnerability in front of people at a higher level. That psychological safety, right, is a critical component to well-being. And so I highly recommend, the author is Amy Edmondson. And so that's one resource that I would give. Another resource that I would give is a book called Leading Geeks. And this one is by Paul Glenn. And the reason that I share this book is there's a lot of folks that are hearing the sound of my voice that are in technical or creative companies. So you're working in a marketing agency, or you're in the content team within a large organization. You're doing creative knowledge work, or you're in highly technical engineering or software programming or AI related work. Well, people that are in technical creative work think very different than other folks in marketing and different functions. And so understanding the way people process information that's very different from you is super, super important. And then the third book that I would recommend is a book, and this is an oldie but goodie for me. It's a book called Six Thinking Hats. And that book gives a really good thought process of how to run meetings, how to make decisions, and how to be inclusive of a lot of different diverse thinking, right, as a part of that process. So these are three books that I think will help leaders and emerging leaders, right, in terms of creating that psychological safety from a mental model, but also from a highly productive model in terms of how do you actually facilitate productive conversations.
Got it. So we all need to come and borrow books from your library then. Don, I'd be remiss if we didn't talk about this important topic from the women's perspective, especially because there's a societal expectation to be excellent in the workplace and excellent at home, making dinner and helping children with science projects and bake sales and sports snacks, and then finding time to exercise and have intimacy and friendships. The pressure is immense. What is your advice for women professionals to make it all work?
So the first thing people will think about is, well, you're not a woman. How are you giving us advice? Right. But I appreciate the question. But, I am the father of three daughters. I've seen my mom succeed significantly in corporate America. My wife, Jackie Ferguson, is on this podcast and is an award-winning content producer and executive. And so I have a perspective. And then also, to give a little bit more perspective on that, I've hired, retained, and grown a significant number of women leaders across my various businesses. And a couple of things. And you're right, there is this sense of being superwoman all the time. And let's use one at the house, me and you, be a little transparent. There was a time in our relationship where you would cook an amazing meal, do the dishes. I would eat that amazing meal, go sit on the couch and be mad at why you were mad.
And this is after a full day of work. Just
after a full day of work. Yeah, after a full day of work. And be mad at why you were mad. I was like, why is she so frustrated? And so now, as we look at our family enterprise, right? When you cook a meal, I do the dishes. It doesn't mean that I'm the perfect partner at home with all of the little things. It means that I have acknowledged and changed behavior, that if you're out in the workforce doing work just as important as I am, that there should be some shared responsibility at the house. That's how we've done it, and it's improved things immensely, right? In terms of how we've thought about it. And I think that's something that partners can do with one another, right? In terms of their relationship. I also think there's something when I do talk with female women leaders, you have to rewire this perfection mindset. And that takes a little bit longer, quite frankly, right? And I'll tell you, a couple of leaders that I've worked with closely, that I work with closely, I've gotten executive coaches for them that are other well-established women leaders, because there are things that women are going through in the workplace that I don't get. And I acknowledge that and create an environment where support can be given to support that. And again, not lowering the standards, but creating an environment to where that help, that vulnerability, this is super important. This is a learning for me and made me check my bias. So, and this is for our audience, I've told you this story, and this happened a couple of weeks ago, but we did a presentation on inclusive leadership in partnership with SAS, who has just been a wonderful partner client with us and one of the early adopters, right, of our tools and just really supported us, which is great to see a big company just cheering for the little engine that could at the diversity movement. And during this presentation, one of the panelists was talking about being vulnerable as a leader and being open with your folks, and that you're not perfect and that you have things to work on and different things. And one of the leaders raised their hand in the room and said, I have a question. And they got the mic and said, well, as a Black woman professional, being vulnerable is also risky because you could then be taken less seriously. You could then get less assignments because you could be portrayed as not being able to handle the workload, right? And so what we had was a really healthy, honest, and a transparent discussion, right? That these biases in the workplace are real. And yes, we talk about being vulnerable as a leader, but as a woman leader, as a Black woman leader, you have to be careful with who you show that vulnerability to, which is a real thing that we have to talk through and work through and be cognizant of in the workplace. And so my advice for women leaders that are trying to do it all is you have to get some outside teammates in your circle, that closet board of advisors that you trust, that can give you permission to slow it down, let you realize you're not perfect, so let's stop trying to be, and that you can't do everything all the time at once because you burn out, you'll break down, or you'll be less effective. And those are learnings that we have to be able to share in a firm but gracious way, so that we can create that next pipeline of women that are going to break those glass ceilings.
Absolutely. We have to normalize that integration that you were talking about on another episode, and making sure that we have time to be amazing professionals and we have time to be, great wives and mothers. So it makes total sense. Thank you for that. Don, we all know the Peter Drucker quote, "What gets measured gets done." And that applies to assessing well-being and performance in addition to organizational KPIs and things that are traditionally measured within business. How does your organization measure the impact of well-being initiatives on high performers' productivity and overall performance?
These measures aren't some kind of ancient secret. Do your top performers stay? When you lose someone in that top performing category, why did you lose them? Did you lose them to an opportunity you just couldn't meet? The number or the opportunity? That happens. That's actually a good thing. Or did you lose them for a reason that you could have controlled? Did you lose them because they were not even put in contention for a promotion that they thought was valuable? Did you lose them because recognition was limited? You want to make sure that when you're doing your exit interviews, that you're not only gaining that information and insight, but you're actually actioning on it. Unfortunately, exit interviews are where a lot of truth is delivered because people no longer have that fear of retribution. And so are you using those conversations to prepare you not to lose the next high performing leader for things that you can control?
Got it. That makes sense. And Don, my last question is one that's a little more personal. So we talked about strategies for well-being and integrating that well-being with your professional life and being successful. What are some of the ways that you manage your own well-being?
It's a really good question. So, and we'll get personal, right? I did a podcast, it was best year, worst year. So when you sell a company, everybody thinks it's the best year, right? But 2023, in many ways, for me personally, was worst year, right? And how do I manage well-being? If I am feeling overloaded, if I'm feeling like I just can't get it all done, sometimes you need somebody to talk to, and it's not a business coach, right? Sometimes therapy matters and is the answer. And men in particular, people in general, need to continue to create an environment where mental health is not stigmatized. And if you need someone to talk to, that you go do it. And in 2023, that's something that was really helpful to me. The second thing that I think is important that I've really learned is the times where I'm highly productive. So I'll use Mondays, for example. I still work 5, 6, 7 days a week, but on Mondays, I do not take a lot of structured meetings. Mondays is where I set the week. Mondays where I work on sales campaigns or ideas or product ideas that are really specific to my value add. Monday is when I review a lot of content from other places in the organization. So I do creative work on Mondays that allows me to get those projects moving. And then Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday are just heavy meetings. Some start 7 a.m. and just go and go and go. But having those Mondays to where I'm working on more personalized projects allows me to be actually more productive when I'm working on group projects, group leadership things throughout the balance of the week. So that's a thing that I do in terms of my schedule. The other thing that is really important in terms of managing my week is I try not to do things that other people can do. And so because I am a business development professional at my core, because I love talking to customers and clients and generating new business, when new leads come in to me directly or different things, sometimes I'll set the meeting myself versus delegating that function to people that can do it as well as I can, in many cases better than I can. And so I'm very disciplined now on doing the work that I should be doing. The final thing that I will tell you is I look across my team and I look at where I can be helpful. And so when I'm doing the one-on-ones for my team members, part of the meetings are updates on projects that they're working, things that I need to be aware of. But half of those meetings are things that I need to review in a working level way with my team so that I'm adding real-time unique value to the products, services, and offerings across the business. The reason that helps me with well-being is because instead of being a micromanager asking for updates every 10 minutes, I'm actually working the products and projects as they're happening a little bit at a time with the team. And it reduces my anxiety of that need to know what's going on and allows me to be micro aware, but still leaving my team plenty of room to have autonomy, to be creative, to be innovative. And then once I have those productive one-on-ones, I can let them be and go forth and crush the rest of their week. And it reduces the anxiety on both sides. I'm more aware because I like to be aware. Most CEOs do, more than they would admit. But I don't have to cross that line of micromanaging because I've gotten the kind of information that I want from my team. So short answer is you have to train your team to share with you the information you need as a leader to feel productive. And those are some of the elements that have helped me. And then a nice old-fashioned once or twice a week. And I don't advocate this for anyone else. So if you are like, but for me, having a drink with a mentor once or twice a week is both relaxing and informative. And that's something that is helpful. For others, it may be going in and hiking. For others, it may be a sport activity. But I do recommend you make certain you have something that gives you energy. For me, it's racquetball, right, as a sport that gives you energy and enthusiasm outside of the workplace that you're looking forward to. Something you're looking forward to outside of work that can give you that release and that energy boost.
That's great. Thanks for sharing that, Don. This episode really shed some light on the crucial balance between achieving peak performance and maintaining optimal well-being. I appreciate your thoughts, Don, and your strategies for success. It's tough being a high performer who also knows and understands that well-being is important, and creating that integration, as you call it, is important. So thanks for sharing your thoughts here.
Jackie, as always, you're welcome back anytime. You always, our episodes go a little bit longer just because of the synergy, and you ask great questions, and I appreciate your time and your effort.
Thanks, Don.
Thank you for joining us on High Octane Leadership with Donald Thompson. Today's episode is a step in our collective journey towards leadership excellence. Remember, every story we share and every insight we gain is a piece in the puzzle of our leadership journey. For more insight and detail, hit the subscribe button so that we can stay connected. For deeper information and more episodes, go to donaldthompson.com. Continue to lead with vision and purpose, and until we meet again, embrace your role as a high-octane leader in the ever-evolving world of business.